Hey everybody, Questwise here, and as promised, today we're going to be making a character from the second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook. I have my traditional character sheet here. Yeah, these are one of the originals. It's torn right out of the box, or the booklet. Just how to bring back some nostalgia for you people who have done this before. 1989. Yeah, so we're going to use one of those today. I've got my would have been my sort of semi original set of dice. So a few of these are from the original set. A few of these I picked up a little later, but we're going to be using those today to kind of put the feel back into the 1980s, early 90s when I started to play. But so let's just dive right into this. This is going to be an interesting video for me because this will be a little bit longer, and we're going to try to discuss some of the things that happen within the rulebook, and then we're going to transition and bring those to the character sheet, and I'll do some close-ups so you can see what it is that I'm doing. But let's start with the rulebook. Okay, so here we are on page number 13. This is the very first thing we're going to do. We're going to roll ability scores. So an interesting thing here is that there are several methods of determining those attributes and rolling those dice to determine those things. There are a total of 6 different methods. And I should point out, first thing, one of the interesting things about second edition that I like, but can be, I can understand why it might be a little bit of a burden, is that the way that the rulebook was constructed involved a lot of reading. There was not a lot of sort of charts to tell you this is what you get, this is how this works kind of thing. There's a lot of text, as you can see here under strength, that you just have to kind of read through to get all the benefits or the details out of what they're trying to portray. So that's one of the things, especially when we get into the races, you'll see that a lot as well too, that there's not just a chart that says, hey, here's the things that you get. You actually have to read through a lot of the text in order to pull out those details and stuff. While that can take a little bit longer to create characters and to glean certain things from the text, I never saw it as really a bad thing. But then again, this is where I started, so I assumed that was the norm for everything. What we're going to do is, there's, like I said, there's numerous different ways of rolling ability scores, and we used a lot of these while we were playing at the heyday back in our day. But these, from number 2 on, are all alternative methods. All alternative. That's kind of hard to say. But we're going to use the original method, which is to roll 3 6-sided dice. Total shown on the dice is your character strength score, straight down the line. So 3d6 straight down the line. So we're going to do that, and we'll just start off with that, and then we'll come back and see what's next. Okay, so here we are at the character sheets, and like I said, we're going to use the intended method, or the official method, not one of the alternative methods, where we're going to roll 3 6, and we're just going to record the stats straight down the line. So we'll start here at my 3d6, and we have 8, 9, 10. That's not bad. So record 10 in here. All right. Dexterity. Ooh, all right. 6, 7, 8. Put that in there. Constitution. All right, so there's 11, 12, 13. All right, next is intelligence. Got 9, 10, 11, 12. Wisdom. We've got 10. And charisma. Ooh, not so good. How about a 6? All right, so here's what we have to start with. We've got a strength of 10, a dexterity of 8. We've got a constitution of 13, an intelligence of 12, a wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 6. These are all very workable. When we played, we never did the thing where you got to re-roll. We did use the method where you would roll 4 6-sided dice and keep the highest, which did give you a little bit more heroic stats. But we're never allowed, once we rolled our 6 stats, we weren't allowed, and it was just a house rule that we had. We weren't allowed to re-roll any of those. We just had to place those where we wanted those to create the character we want. So next, let's take a look with what stats we have here. We'll take a look and see what kind of character we can make with this. So be right back. Okay, so here we have our racial ability requirements chart, and we're going to just check. Now, I'll come back and I'll fill in all this stuff later, and I'll show that to you. While it's probably easiest to do it as you roll your thing, these might become adjusted a little bit depending on future things. So we'll fill these in later. I might do it even off camera. It's not really super important because it's just a chart. It tells you things like hit probability and hit point adjustment and that kind of stuff. But what we want to look at right now is this racial ability requirements here, and just see what it is. As a human, there are no requirements, and that's straight across the board. But as you'll notice, for like a dwarf, you have to have a minimum strength of 8, and minimum dexterity of 3. I think we meet pretty much all of these. Constitution. So we could do a dwarf. It looks like we make all of those requirements. Let's do that. Let's go for dwarf. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply put up here in our race, dwarf. Okay. So we've got that filled in. Now I'm doing this completely ad hoc as I go along here. There's not, I don't have any sort of, I did make a few characters before doing this video, but I'm doing it completely ad hoc here. I didn't plan to do anything particular in this. As you can see, I just rolled the stats that way. And we chose to do dwarf based on the chart there as well too. But let me show you what I was talking about when it comes to the way the text is laid out in this book. So here we have the section on the dwarves. This is on page 20 of the Core Rulebook. And as you can see, the text for this dwarf race runs down through here, through this entire column, and to this column. Now, while there are a few things in here like Constitution saving throw bonuses and some underground charts and stuff as well here too, a lot of the other text, or a lot of the other details that you need, are in this big block of text. Now, like I said, to me, it didn't really, I didn't see it as a hindrance, only because this is where I began, and I just assumed that this is the way that role-playing games are always written. There are definitely certain games out there right now that do this a lot better and make it a lot easier, but this does require some time and some reading through some stuff. I'm not going to bore you with all that, but it does give you some statistics in here as well too. Average height of a dwarf, how long they live, dark hair and dark eyes. They enjoy beer, mead, and even stronger drink, and it goes through a lot of stuff in here as well too. Dwarves typically dwell in hilly or mountainous regions. They prefer to live in comforting gloom and solidness that is found underground. And then here's where the stuff starts to fill in right here as well too. A character of the dwarf race can be a cleric, a fighter, or a thief. He can also choose to be a fighter, cleric, or fighter, thief. All right, so it's built into the text, and it does take a little bit of, you would have probably missed this if you were just looking at these charts. So let's take a look. We can be either a cleric, a fighter, or a thief. Now, based upon what stats we have here, fighter might be okay. Our strength is a little low. Our constitution is pretty good. So that might be good it could be a good, decent fighter. Our wisdom's a little low. I guess it's on average with our strength, so a cleric might be okay. Our dexterity is below average though, so thus a thief is probably out. So let's go straight up fighter and we'll see what happens next. So we'll go over to that and let's just put in our class up here. We're going to go fighter. And we're going to start at level 1. Okay, so dwarf fighter level 1. Okay, so what I did is I went ahead and I filled back in our racial abilities and numbers just to give you a feel of what we're working with here. So strength basically across the board, no bonus to hit probability, no damage adjustment. It's a 10. It's average. We're like a huge, average strength for a mortal. Weight allowance is 40 pounds that we can carry. We can maximally press 115 pounds. Some other statistics in here as well too. Our constitution is pretty nice. 85% chance of surviving, or they call system shock, surviving anything that sort of mutates or changes our body via magic. Resurrection survival 90%. Pretty standard. Intelligence is 12, so we get we can learn up to 3 additional languages in addition to our normal language. And then I just put hash marks through this as well because since we're playing a fighter, there's not going to be any spell adjustments. I just wanted to show this to you as well too. Our charisma being as low as it is, we can have a maximum number of henchmen at 2, and our loyalty base is a -3, and reaction adjustment to us is -2. So we're not weighing in too well there. We are not going to be a lord. We're not going to have a lot of followers moving around with us and stuff as such as well too. So let's go back and we'll fill in some more details on our dwarf fighter. Okay, so next up on the agenda here, there's a section here that says, it talks about languages a little bit. This little paragraph here says, from living underground, dwarves have found it useful to learn the languages of several of their neighbors, both friendly and hostile. The initial languages of a dwarf that can learn are common, dwarf, gnome, goblin, kobold, orc, and any other your DM allows. So then again, what we're going to see right there, with our intelligence of 12, we can learn 3 additional languages in addition to Dwarven, which is our language that we speak automatically, and we'll probably take Common, most likely, and maybe Goblin and Kobold. Sounds good. So we'll put those down a little bit later, and those are ones that we can learn. We don't have to start with those. There's our ability that we can learn up to 3. That's how intelligent we are, so we can learn that many. Next, we go down here. It says, by nature, dwarves are non-magical and never use magical spells. Clerics are a little bit different than that. This gives them a bonus saving throw against attacks from magical wands, staves, rods, and spells. This bonus is +1 for every 3.5 points of Constitution score. So down here it's going to give you, so we get this bonus here, and then we get a Constitution saving throw bonus, which I will add into the screen here, which we will add to our character sheet as well. And since our Constitution is 13, we're going to get a +3 to our saving throw bonus. Note that this paragraph here also gets added into this saving throw bonus. Dwarves have an exceptional resistance to toxic substances. All dwarven characters make saving throws against poison from the same bonus that they get against against magical attacks. So again, you can kind of see that some of this text is, it could be confusing to a new player because all this stuff is sort of mixed in right in there as well too. So I'm going to add these saving throw bonuses, and then we'll come right back and we'll dive a little bit deeper into this as well too. All right, another interesting note that we should make down here too, again, this paragraph that runs the bottom part of this page here talks about how dwarves have problems with magical items, and they're not specifically suited for dwarves to use, and that there is a chance that those magical items and things, devices will fail while they're using them. So we should keep that as a note as well too. You can usually put that under your special abilities section of your character sheet, or in the back on the notes and stuff as well too. So just that's something to keep note of, that dwarves don't work especially well with magic devices and items and stuff as well too, and there's a chance that they will fail. Next up, and we're going to just slide this down, we're going to go up here, and we're going to notice the next thing up here. In melee, dwarves add a +1 to their dice rolls to hit orcs, half-orcs, goblins, and hobgoblins. When ogres, trolls, ogre magi, giants, and titans attack dwarves, these monsters must subtract 4 from their attack rolls. So we're going to put that under special abilities on our character sheet. Dwarven infravision is down in here as well too. They get to see in the dark for 60 feet. And then they also have miners of great skill, and they're going to have these special abilities as well too. So I'm going to add those to the character sheet, and I will be back momentarily. Okay, so I've added in our special abilities here, +1 to hit goblinoids. Giant can have a -4 to hit us. All of our special abilities detect slopes, that kind of stuff, and a percentage chance, or our chances on a d6 to roll those things when we're actively doing them. Now here's an interesting thing, and this is just a weird design thing that sort of kind of sucks a little bit, because it kind of forces you to read through this entire text before you actually begin. But for these special abilities, it says, please note the dwarf must deliberately try. That doesn't just happen when you're walking down through, you can't just detect a new passage or a tunnel by just being in one. You actually have to sort of search for it. But it's this paragraph right here. Because of their sturdy builds, dwarves add +1 to their initial constitution scores. Their dour and suspicious natures cause them to subtract 1 from their initial charisma scores. Interesting that they put this at the very end and not the beginning, and this is kind of a bummer because we've already sort of went through and we've already determined a bunch of stuff on our character sheet based upon our stats that we've already had. So this is kind of a drawback to that it makes you read the entire section. And again, like I said, it's just a wall of text. And like I said, to me, back in the 90s, it wasn't a big deal. But I just wanted to show this to you now and how we'd run into that kind of problem where now we have to go back and readjust our scores. Our charisma is actually going to get worse, but our constitution is actually going to get better. So I'm going to adjust those now, and then I'll come back and show you those adjustments that have been made. Okay, so we made some adjustments to our character here, and get this to focus really quickly. All right, so our constitution went up by 1, which, increased these a little bit, which is fine. That's great. Our constitution, or our charisma did go down a little bit, so our number of henchmen stayed the same, but our loyalty base went down, and our reaction adjustment went down. Thus, we are a very bitter, grumpy, old dwarf fighter. And with that said, we're going to jump right into the fighter part of the book here. And I want to show you what's interesting is that in 2nd edition they would break things up sort of by groupings. So warriors encompassed several different character classes, being the fighter, the paladin, and the ranger. All fell under the warrior grouping and used the this chart for experience. That's another thing that's really interesting about 2nd edition, is that there were different experience charts for each character class. Thus they would go up at different levels. As you can see here, to reach 2nd level, a fighter needs 2,000 experience points, but the same character to reach second level for a paladin or a ranger would need 2,250. Here we get our hit dice, so we're going to start with 10. When we played, we did this a couple of different ways, and there are alternate methods in the book itself as well too. Sometimes at first level we would take the maximum plus our constitution bonus if we had any, and a lot of times we would just simply roll for that as well too. What we're going to do today is we're going to do the sort of default method of rolling the d10 for our hit points as well too. And down here below we'll see some of the one of the things that's special about the warrior is that they get a number of attacks per round, per whatever level they're at. And according to this, warriors level 1 through 6 get 1 attack per round, but they do get better. And the warriors are the only ones that have this sort of special ability. You'll never see wizards with, unless they have some sort of a spell that allows them to attack more than once a round. This is a specific thing for warriors. And by warriors, I mean fighters, paladins, and rangers as well too. But here's where we're going to start. We decided to pick a fighter. Again, that's very simple. There'll be a few more decision things to make if you picked wizard, because you'll have to pick out some spells. But again, you're only going to start with a few spells as well too. So down here it says we have to have a minimum strength of 9, which, as noted before, we have a strength of 10, so we're good there. Prime requisite is strength, and all races are allowed to be a fighter. again, we fall into this big wall of text here. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, though, it was these blue text boxes that really captured my imagination as a kid. This is what made me want to go on to college and university to study history and to study folklore and to study mythology, where these blue pop-out texts. As you can see in this one, it says a fighter is a warrior, an expert in weapons, and if he's clever, tactics and strategy. There are many famous fighters from legend: Hercules, Perseus, Hiawatha, Beowulf, Siegfried, and then it just goes on to list a whole bunch more. Alexander the Great, Charlemagne, Spartacus. Visit your local library and you can uncover many heroic fighters. These are the things that made me want to go and study history. And it was the main reason why I went on to study history at a university, as well as folklore, languages, and mythology. So just a little aside from creating a character, that this was one of the most important things to me about Second Edition, about this rule book, as it were. But anyhow, onward and upward talks about how the fighter's alignment can be of any good or evil, lawful or chaotic or neutral. We'll determine that in just a little bit, our alignment. As a dwarf fighter, we might go with chaotic good. That's always been one of my favorites, especially since his charisma is pretty low and doesn't. He's not going to be real chipper anyway. He's not going to be real well liked as well. They cannot cast magical spells. When a fighter attains 9th level, he becomes a lord, and then it goes into this chart over here, which talks about followers and troops and gaining putting together a stronghold and a castle and whatnot as well too. So none of this applies to us right now because this only happens once you reach 9th level. So what we're going to do now is we'll go into the next part of this and we'll roll some hit points and we'll go into details about the rest of the skills and buying equipment and such. Okay, so before we go into alignment and choosing the alignment and stuff, I just want to roll my hit points. Like I said, we're going to use this default method of rolling for your initial hit points. And as a fighter, we have a D10, so we'll roll that now and we'll record it in our hit points part of the sheet here. So 8. Because we don't have a Constitution bonus, we are just going to start off with 8 hit points. That's not a bad start at all. Now, let's transition into our alignment. There's the alignment takes part of the portion of the book. So it starts on page 46, goes through 48, I believe. But here's the portion that we're going to be looking at here. It breaks down the alignment by the 9 split grid. And but what we talked about earlier, we want to do some chaotic good. Chaotic good characters are strong individuals marked by a streak of kindness and benevolence. They believe that in all the virtues of goodness and right, but they have little use for laws and regulations. They have no use for people who try to push other folk around and tell them what to do. Their actions are guided by their own moral compass, which, although good, may not always be in perfect agreement with the rest of society. So we're going to use chaotic good as our alignment, and we're going to put that in here. We always just abbreviate it with chaotic good, CG, and there we are. Next we'll go into the skill section. Okay, so here we are at the proficiencies portion of our character creation. And this is something that when we were playing in the 90s pretty hardcore, we did this. I don't want to say we did it wrong, because there's no right or wrong way to playing a role-playing game, but we did things a little unorthodox. So if you read through all this text, it talks about weapon proficiencies and non-weapon proficiencies. And there are multiple ways to use non-weapon proficiencies. As it states down here in the corner, which is a little bit off the screen that you can see here, you get weapon proficiencies based upon your group. So we are warriors, so we're going to get 4 weapon proficiencies. And when we reach a certain number of levels, we'll get another one. So every 3 levels, we'll get another weapon proficiency, things that we are proficient in using. Now, non-weapon proficiencies are optional. And while we were playing this in the 90s, I think that we didn't realize that they were optional. In fact, we used all the options that's available on the next page. So there are a couple different options, and we'll take a look at that at first. So warriors initially are going to get 3 non-weapon proficiencies, and they'll get another one at every 3 levels. So let's turn the page, and I'll show you what I mean. So non-weapon proficiencies starts down here in the corner of page 52 and then cuts across over to page 53. The interesting thing about non-weapon proficiencies is that there are basically 3 different ways in order to use this. You can buy weapon or non-weapon proficiencies. You can buy a number of skills based upon, as we saw, we have 3 of them as a warrior, and you can choose those from a list, which is the one that we always did as well too. The other option is using what you know. In other words, you simply, if you're playing a dwarven warrior, if you could, proficiently describe that your character would know how to do that, you would have that skill and you would be able to do that type of thing. The other option is sort of a broad category called secondary skills, in which you would choose a profession and then you would get a number of skills or the skill type of actions based on that particular profession. So for instance, if you were a fisherman, you would know how to swim, you know how to use nets, and how to handle a small craft on the water. We sort of incorporated back in the 90s all of this stuff together and made it one big conglomeration. The one that I love to use the most currently, though, is the actual chart itself on page 54, where you have a number of general non-weapon proficiencies and then some broken down by the profession itself, or the character class itself. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to write this all down. I'm going to pick the ones that I want to do, and I'll come back and I'll show you what I've chosen. Okay, so here we are back. I've noted my weapon proficiencies and my non-weapon proficiencies as well. As noted, as a warrior, we get 4 weapon proficiencies, so I picked battle axe, dagger, shortbow, and hammer, those being the weapons that I can use without a penalty. And according to the book, if there's anything, like if I'm using a hand axe instead of a battle axe, there's a little bit of a penalty. It's like a -1. But if I'm completely outside of using any of the stuff, so if I were to use let's say a scimitar or something, some longsword, I would have even a higher penalty because it's not something that's even related to any of my skills here. Under non-weapon proficiencies, I picked brewing because, dwarves, right? We want to make some beer. Over here, it is an intelligence check with a no modifier at all. And I took endurance as well too, but endurance cost me, because we had 3 slots available, endurance actually counts as 2 skills. So that counts as my 3 together with those, and that's a constitution check with a 0 modifier as well too. So how this works is, if I were going to make a brewing skill check, say I wanted to use it to make some beer or to test the quality of a beer, I would roll a d20 and try to roll under my intelligence score, which is a 12. And there's no modifier to that roll at all whatsoever. And endurance in the same way. If I were trying to push myself beyond the bounds of normal, climbing or traveling for a long period of time, I would make a constitution check with a 0 modifier, trying to roll below my constitution score as well too. So next, let's go on to equipment, and we'll be getting near the end of this creation. So the next part of character creation is actually buying equipment. But in order to do that, we need to know how much money we have. And so this is interesting. In a few other more modern games, there are a lot of times where a starting character will just get a starting package of stuff, a starting package of clothing and a few weapons and some trinkets and stuff. In 2nd edition, the way we used to play is that you would roll for your money and you would buy everything you needed out of your initial sort of starting amount of money that your character sort of begins with, based upon their previous experiences and maybe their previous profession or whatnot. So as a warrior, we're going to get 5d4 times 10. So let's roll a couple of these. I only have 2d4s with me, so we're just going to have to modify a little bit here. So we've got a 1 and a 1. That's not a good start. So that's 2 so far. 4 and a 1. So 7. And then we'll roll one more. 8, 9. So we're going to start with 90 gold pieces. And we'll make a note of that on the back of here. 90 GP. Okay. And then over here on page number 66 of the Core Rulebook, we have the equipment list, and it goes on for several pages. And it includes everything from clothing right down to shoes and cloaks and hats and stuff and hose, all the daily lodgings, all sorts of stuff, household provisioning and such as well too. So I would use my initial 90 gold to buy the stuff that I needed for my adventurer, and that could be everything from household provisionings if I wanted, like eggs and figs and raisins and stuff, up to transports of ships and wagons and whatever. I'd also be paying for any animals that I would have, such as horses, as well as my weapons and or armor if I could afford them. So I'll go through and I'll spend the 90 gold pieces on just some basic equipment to kind of get our character started, and then we'll come back here and we'll finish this character up. All right, and here's the final part of our character creation process for the second edition character, AD&D character. So I went through and I spent our starting gold on a few items. As you can see in the back here, I added some clothing and a lantern and a small chest, a water skin. After I bought weapons and equipment and armor, I had 7 gold pieces left, 5 silver pieces, 3 copper pieces. For weapons, I took because I wanted to stick with our weapon proficiencies, right? So I went with battle axe, we went with dagger, and a short bow. And a short bow was actually the most expensive, weighing in at 30 gold pieces for that. So that and the armor and a few other things really sucked a lot of the money down as well too. We went with leather armor, which gives us an armor class of 8, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, because that's where this number here, this THACO or THACO, comes into play as well too. And I put up the stats on that as well too, and filled in a little bit of brief stuff up here. So our character, Beother Brasshold, the dwarf, he's a Catagood first level fighter, and according to whatever sort of campaign setting you're playing in, you'll be able to fill in all this kind of stuff as well too. But that's basically our character right there, and that's a fully created character, ready to go, ready to play, ready to bring to the tabletop, enter into a campaign or a one-shot or however you want to do it. Pretty painless. Like I said, it's pretty much the same though if you're going to play anything else. We went fairly light, fairly easy, but even playing first level character of like a wizard or a paladin, there's just a few things that actually you have to do to add to the sheet. Mostly that's going to be like choosing spells, but even a beginning wizard character only has a few spells to begin with as well too. But I did want to talk about this THACO, about this number, how I came to this THACO 20 number here, and that's actually a chart in the book here. And let me zoom in just a little bit for you. And that's based upon this chart right here. This is on page 91 of the Player's Handbook. Everybody starts with a THACO or a THACO, and that's an acronym that stands for 2-hit armor class 0 of 20. And how that works, and how this is a little bit different than first edition. First edition called this the attack matrix, and they changed this to this acronym THACO. So how that works is that everybody starts with a 20, and that means that on a 20-sided die, you would have to roll, if the person you were fighting, the creature or NPC that you were fighting, had an armor class of 0, you would have to roll a 20 to hit them. and it's a descending armor class, so the lower the number, the better. So if you remember, our character has an 8. Basically, if you have no armor on whatsoever, you have a 10, I believe. I think it's a 10 straight up. So there's a 50% chance of hitting you. And with an 8, our armor class is a little bit better. So if we are being attacked by a creature that also had a THAC0 of 20, as an 8, they would need to roll a 12. And that would be 8 minus 20. You would need to roll a 12 in order to successfully hit us. 12 or higher. All right. So that's how that THAC0 thing comes to be. And this is all calculated here. And actually, for warriors, is the best because it goes down by 1 every time until you reach level 20. And at level 20, you basically can hit an armor class of 0 by rolling a 1. But armor classes, because it's a descending armor class, if you get to things like full plate mail, that's magical, that's has a shield, we're talking negative numbers. We're talking -3s, -4s, that kind of stuff as well too. So that's how THAC0 kind of in a nutshell works, and how we came to that number on our character sheet there as well too for our weapon combat and stuff as well. So that's it. That's in a nutshell character creation for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition for our dwarf character, Beother Brasshold. If you have any questions, please leave them in the notes down below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And next time, we will actually be talking about... probably going to be talking about the differences between 1st edition and 2nd edition, maybe even 3rd edition, and how the game sort of evolved over time and became what it is, from some of the earlier editions up into the into some of the newer editions as well too. So until next time, I'm Questwise, and I am out.